Hello, grade 11. Welcome to Face with Mr. Ross, part 3. Seems a lot of you are stuck about what to try to write about surveillance, power, and control in Handmaid's Tale. So I'm going to give kind of a broad talk about that. Now, you remember at the beginning of the year we had these sort of foundational talks about clashing forces in society that have been happening in some cases for hundreds of years. So we have, for example, we talked about Marxism, the class struggle between the powerful and the less powerful. Marx began discussing how the capitalist who owns the means of production oppressed the powerless workers, earning meager amounts of money and living in horrible conditions. But now this idea is expanded just between more powerful and less powerful groups in society, such as corporations compared to workers, but who are still paid fairly well, but are not obviously in squalid poverty. We also talked about feminism and gender issues, the clash between men and women, the progress from being owned by men to fighting for the right to vote, to avoiding issues like rape, sexual harassment, equality in the workplace, equal pay. So we've discussed that clash. More recently, we have the clash of the LGBT community, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual community, and they're fighting against, say, the heterosexual elements of people who, let's say, are homophobic or resisting their efforts to be equal in society, to fully join, be members of society. And even more recently, we have and then we have civil rights and human rights, which is prominently in the States, of course, is for Black people, but of course this can extend to Asian people, and now to this, what I mentioned, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, the LGBT community. All these groups, even disabled people, people of any kind of color, these groups have been fighting to be accepted as equal members in society and have access to opportunities and whatnot. So these are all things that we've been discovered. And now we come to issues of power and surveillance. There's a French philosopher, thinker, and literary critic called Michel Foucault, and he argued that actually the Marxist view of power, control of the masses, exploitation is kind of outdated, and that power is actually very dynamic and shifting, and that power, that people, the people who are what Marx would call the oppressed resist. They resist and fight back, and it's always sort of power dynamics are shifting all the time. It's not just the case of the rich suppress the poor, the capitalists exploit and dominate the workers. There's a shifting and back and forth of elements of it. Okay, and he talked about there being 4 kinds of power, 4 models. There's first of all what's called sovereign power, the power of the king or the emperor. And then there's disciplinary power, so power that controls your space and movement, power in which if you space, movement, time, behavior, and if you are to breach or violate or resist this power, you can be disciplined, okay, in various ways. Okay, so you can get in trouble and be disciplined. He also talks about pastoral power, and this is the power that's a gentler kind, but very pervasive in society. It's the power to encourage us and advise us how to behave, to be better people or citizens. This kind of power is everywhere, urging you to wash your hands, for men to pee into the urinal, not to the side and make a mess, to give up your bus seat to older people or pregnant women, this is a very wide-ranging and common type of power. And finally, we have power is knowledge. And you may have heard the phrase knowledge is power. Okay? And those relationships between who gets it, who controls it, and who allows that knowledge to be disseminated or to be to spread the knowledge and allow others to access the knowledge is a big part of power. Do you just keep it to do those in power keep that knowledge to themselves, or do they allow others to find out, learn about it, and gain from it? And that's a big part of power as well. So where does surveillance fit into this type of power in society, for example? Well, I want you to think about these organizations and the definitions of power that Michel Foucault has put out. Think about prisons. Think about psychiatric wards of hospitals. Think about those who serve in the military. And think about schools. These are all forms of power. These are all organizations that exercise very similar forms of surveillance and power. Yes, schools are a part of it. Think about it. You got a uniform. So do prisoners, people in the military, people in the psychiatric ward. They all have to wear the same gown. There's bells. They tell you where to go and where to go and when to go. On the time, bells tell you that you have to go somewhere, and you have the schedule that tells you what you're doing. You cannot leave. You cannot leave the psychiatric hospital or the prison or the military service when you're serving the military. You cannot leave school. You cannot leave the classroom that you're in when you want. You have to ask for permission to go to the washroom. You cannot leave the school grounds, just like in a prison or psychiatric ward or hospital. Your posture, I'm surveilling you, I'm watching you. If you slouch too much, if you put your head on the desk, I can tell you stop doing that. Sit up straight. Okay. Yes, these issues of space, control of space. You have to be in a certain room at a certain time. You have a desk that you go to the same one. There's a lunch. You eat it only in the canteen. You cannot bring ice cream out of the Merlion Cafe. All these things are controlling aspects of your space, like in The Handmaid's Tale. She is in the gym with all the other handmaids. She sleeps there. She cannot leave it unless she gets permission. She is in the commander and Serena's house. That's her room. There's certain times when she can go out. She can, I think, has some flexibility to go to the kitchen. So the ants are watching the handmaids. The eyes are watching the handmaids. The guardians can watch the handmaids. Okay? Serena Joy is even watching the handmaids. Just like even at school, at lunchtime, you think it's your free time. You are being watched. There are teachers positioned all over the school. In the canteen, in the hallways, in the ping pong room, even nobody goes there. In the library, you're being watched, even. What was I thinking of here? And if you go to the 4th floor or 3rd floor during lunchtime, you do not have freedom of movement there either. You are being watched. There are teachers there, and they will send you away from the classroom floors. You are not. So all of these are aspects of space, time, movement, and they're very similar to prisons and hospitals and military service. And Offred is under the same idea of surveillance. You guys should think about that when she goes for a walk. Why are there 2 of them? Because one can spy on the other and inform on the other. Okay? There's so many ways in which she is watched and is limited. Now, we have CCTV, and Margaret Atwood didn't project the ubiquitousness of CCTV being everywhere. But people serve those methods. Discipline. Offred can be zapped by the cattle prod. She can be hung from the wall. She can be sent to the colonies. You're lucky. We only have 2 or 3 mild methods of discipline to control you. They are emailing your parents, having you serve detention at lunch with Miss Smith for the second half of lunch, and keeping you after school, typically for your EE, which is when in most cases you face discipline. So at least your forms of discipline are not as severe as Offred's. So I hope I've given you some ideas about this idea that surveillance is power, surveillance is control. Of course, prisoners locked in their cell is not as severe as you being forced to stay in your seat in the classroom, but it's a similar idea, isn't it? The prisoners have a set period of time to eat. Okay, they have a set period of time when they're allowed to walk around the prison yard or outside for exercise. You can do that at lunch if you wish. You're allowed to go to the field. The field's the only place you can go. You can't go outside of that area. So you see that it's shocking if you think about the similarities between these institutions. And Offred is undergoing her own set of surveillance, in which it's not just surveillance of what she can do, it also controls her aspects of her behavior in terms of what you would define as self-censorship. Okay? So in China, self-censorship is very effective. People are so scared to write a letter or say something that could offend the government and get them in trouble that it's better to say nothing, or even self-censor yourself to say even less than you normally would. That's extremely effective because maybe you're self-censoring something you're going to say or write that the government wouldn't actually mind you saying, or you would get in trouble. But you're saying even less, or expressing yourself even less than you normally would, than you would need to. So Offred, look how scared she is to say something to Off Glen. She's frightened to say anything to Off Glen, her friend that she walks with, because everybody's paranoid about surveillance, about being informed on, about being turned in. Okay, so in your learner portfolios, you need to be raising some of these types of issues, posting on the learner portfolio, and then responding to other people's posts, because like I said, there's separate questions on the posts. So, get to it. I know I don't see you. We're not, the school closure is ongoing, but we need to continue on with the tasks. Exams will happen next year. The individual oral exam will be happening likely in September, toward the end of it. So, be disciplined, keep working hard, and we have to continue on to the end of the year. We don't know what's going to happen, but we have to continue on. Thank you and goodbye. This is the end of the part 3, Face to Face with Mr. Ross.